Do you remember the Vietnam tunnels? What about the soldiers and the Marines that had to go in and clear them out? They were called tunnel rats. The age of the tunnel rat has come full circle in 2023 because Hamas in the Gaza Strip has dug miles upon miles of tunnels all over the city. The IDF has their work cut out for them when the invasion finally kicks off. Let's talk about the history and the implications of fighting in an environment like this, where your enemy can be in the next room, on the floor, or under your feet. I'll give my thoughts later on. Let's get into it. Tunnels in warfare go back thousands of years. In medieval times, engineers would dig massive tunnels from the siege line all the way to the bastions and walls of the grand European castles. They would do this to get at the foundations and bring a section of wall or tower down. Then they could walk their forces through to conquer the city. In World War I, Army pioneers on both sides would dig huge tunnel systems from the friendly trench line to the enemy trench line. Every now and then, the men digging would actually dig right into the enemy trench. They would have to fight it out underground. One of the largest explosions in history occurred at the Battle of Messines in June 1917. The British dug a tunnel under a hill that the Germans occupied, and had fortified with pillboxes and placed large caliber guns and other fortifications. They dug directly under the main fortification and packed 1,000,000 pounds of explosives under it. It was the largest pre-nuclear explosion in history. In the Vietnam War, American GIs called tunnel rats would have the ugly task of clearing out Viet Cong tunnel systems. The Viet Cong had dug massive tunnel networks. They used them to move troops from one location to another and move supplies around the countryside. They were equipped with kitchens, barracks, armories, and even medical facilities. The tunnels were mazes and full of booby traps. If you weren't Viet Cong, then you didn't know the correct routes, or where the false tunnels were. Two-man teams would go in with pistols, a knife, and grenades. Many fell victim to booby traps, others would get lost in the dark. Many GIs that survived were scarred from the trauma inflicted during the missions into the tunnels. The Palestinian-Israeli conflict has been going on for decades. In 1993, the Palestinian Liberation Authority signed the first of the Oslo Accords, establishing the Palestinian Authority, and in 2005, Israel withdrew from the Gaza Strip. 2 years later, Hamas seized power. Once Hamas seized power, Israel began construction of the barrier wall, known as the Iron Wall, in 1994. The wall runs the length of Gaza at around 60 kilometers. It was completed in 2006. The barrier has sensors, cameras, remote-controlled machine guns, and watchtowers every 2 kilometers. In 2017, Israel began construction of an underground barrier, complete with sensors to detect digging of new tunnels. The barrier is 18 meters deep, or 60 feet. After Israel and Egypt signed the peace treaty in 1979, the town of Rafah was split in half, each being on one side of the border. After Hamas seized power in 2007, Egypt and Israel closed their borders with the Gaza Strip, cutting off access to vital supplies. Hamas began constructing tunnels under the Egypt border to bypass the blockade. The border would open and close many times over the years. Many tunnels were discovered and destroyed, but then more would be built. Between 2007 and 2013, more than 1,532 tunnels were running under the border. The size of the tunnel trade was even greater than the normal trade above ground. This is where the Palestinians and Hamas learned the science of tunnel building. It has been reported for years that Hamas had been building tunnels underneath Gaza. The total size and dimensions are currently unknown, but it's been said that the tunnel network doubles the size of the massive network built by the Viet Cong. The tunnel entrances are said to be in homes, schools, mosques, hospitals, and even brush. Many tunnel entrances connect to a tunnel that will then branch off in many directions. They then lead off to connect to other buildings. The tunnels are generally 2 meters high by 1 meter wide. They're built of concrete and equipped with lights, electricity, and sometimes rails to transport goods. Tunnels are also booby-trapped with IEDs. Over time, Hamas has equipped the tunnels with rooms to host command centers, barracks, armories, medical facilities, and bulk rocket storage. They can move weapons and rockets from one end of the Gaza Strip to the other without the IDF's massive surveillance network seeing them. The tunnels under the Palestinian-Israeli border have been a major headache for the IDF. Tunnels can snake under the border and give Hamas militants a way to kidnap and harass Israeli civilians. On October 7, 2023, Hamas launched thousands of rockets. Militants breached the border wall and killed over 1,000 Israeli men, women, and children. It was a gruesome attack, and the tunnels played a major part in it. They were used to store launchers and rockets for the barrage. When the terrorists brought back the hostages, they used the tunnels to move them, keeping them away from the cameras and drones of the IDF. As I write this, over 200 hostages are still somewhere under Gaza City in those tunnels. Long before this attack, the tunnels caused a psychological impact on the Israeli population. Kidnappings were always in the back of their minds. The rocket barrages were still a threat, but they hadn't caused a large issue in years. The Iron Dome system has an extremely high intercept rate, keeping the population relatively safe. The IDF has said that it will be invading the Gaza Strip to destroy Hamas for the brutal attacks on October 7th. When they do, they will have to deal with something no military has had to deal with on this scale since the Vietnam War. Each tunnel will have to be cleared of militants and booby traps before being demolished. When the IDF crosses that border fence and rolls through Gaza, they will have to be careful of their 70-ton tanks falling through the road. The massive bombardment they have conducted over the last 2 weeks has for sure weakened any tunnel close to the road's surface. IDF soldiers will have to clear every room from every building in a massive city, with the majority of the buildings being multi-story. Militants will be able to fire at the Israelis from one house, escape through a tunnel and pop in another house and begin firing on the Israelis again. The US learned this hard lesson in the Battle of Fallujah in Iraq. Urban fighting is the hardest fighting there is. Warfare is three-dimensional. Stairwells are one of the deadliest places when clearing a building. There are many angles that a bullet can come from. It can take up to 3 rifles to cover all angles. With the tunnels, there is a whole nother level of danger. The use of tunnels in warfare is an ancient concept. They can give the defender a massive advantage and the attacker a massive headache. The use of the civilian population to shield Hamas from the IDF is despicable. It was reported today that Hamas's main headquarters was located under the main hospital in Gaza, which puts civilian lives in dire risk. Any facility that is used to fire rockets or house an armory is a legal military target. Hamas hopes that if the IDF strikes the hospital to destroy the Hamas headquarters, that they will be able to propagandize the event in their favor. I want to restate that Hamas's actions are horrible, and they do need to be destroyed. The use of civilians as shields is intolerable. The murder of innocent men, women, and children cannot stand, and Israel isn't going to let it. But I do hope the IDF can complete their invasion with as little loss to life as possible. And I know they'll do everything they can. Let me know in the comments what you think of the tunnel network under Gaza. I want to hear your thoughts. Please subscribe for more content like this. Leave a like and comment if you enjoy it. See you in the next one.